Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a retired prosecutor buys a slice of desert paradise to escape the noise, a shadowy HOA empire decides it wants his land and will do anything to take it. No warrants. No warning. Just a war of forged maps, fake cops, and buried secrets. But they picked the wrong man to push. I always thought I'd retire quietly. Not the rocking chair on a porch type of quiet, but the dusty, sun-baked silence of the desert, where your only neighbors are saguaros and coyotes too proud to beg. That's why I bought the land. 14 acres of godforsaken, gloriously empty scrubland, hugging the invisible line between Texas and New Mexico. No HOA, no nosy board members, no damn meetings about the color of your mailbox. Just the creaking bones of a forgotten adobe house and the promise of sovereignty. The house had good bones, stone walls, heavy wood beams, and a soul. Built in the 80s by a Vietnam vet named Hank McCrae, it had sat empty for a couple years after he passed. I got it directly from his kids. Private deal, no auctions, no public listings. Just a handshake, a fat envelope of paperwork, and a visit to the county clerk's office where my name went into the books. Title, easement, plat maps, even an old water rights deed that made the lawyer raise his eyebrows. It was mine, and it was clean. The first week, I pulled out 20 pounds of dead rodents, scared off a raccoon squatter in the attic, and replaced every light fixture that buzzed like an angry wasp. It was paradise. The kind where nobody could tell you to cut your grass or where to park your truck. I brought in new appliances, patched the roof, even painted the front door a defiant, rich copper red that would give any HOA president an aneurysm. Then, right as I was starting to feel at home, I got the letter. No envelope, just a folded piece of heavyweight paper shoved into the metal mailbox I'd bolted to a cedar post out front. Thick font, embossed logo at the top, Sierra Heights Homeowners Association. I remembered the name. Across the road, behind a line of perfectly spaced creosote bushes and a wrought iron gate with faux marble columns, sat a walled-in subdivision like something out of a Botox commercial. Cookie-cutter mansions with fake tile roofs, motion-detecting sprinklers, and residents who probably ironed their welcome mats. The letter was short and smug. As a resident within the extended boundary of Sierra Heights, you are hereby required to either 1. Join the HOA and comply with all governing rules and assessments, or 2. Pay a monthly land use fee of $3,500 to cover infrastructure, road access, perimeter security, and shared community amenities. I laughed out loud. In my underwear, holding a mug that said "World's Okayest Lawyer," I laughed so hard I spilled coffee on my bare foot. Then I read it again. There was no mistake. They thought my land was part of their empire, that I owed them rent. Rent. For living in my own damn house. I penned a response that same day, typed, notarized, and delivered by certified mail. I cited my deed, the plat map, and the exact statute from the county land code confirming I was not, under any circumstance, part of their jurisdiction. I ended it with a note. Further contact on this matter will be treated as harassment. Kindly piss off. I figured that was the end of it. A paperwork pissing match. One and done. These people were used to bullying new residents, and I wasn't the type to be pushed around. 2 days later, I was elbow-deep in grout fixing the guest bathroom tile when I saw a white SUV roll up the drive. No plates, just a little magnetic sign that read Sierra Heights Compliance Team. 4 of them stepped out. Matching reflective vests, clipboards, and the look of people who took too much pride in laminated badges. One of them, a pudgy guy with a pencil mustache and mirrored sunglasses, started walking toward my front steps like he owned the place. "You need to vacate the premises, sir," he said without even a greeting. "We're conducting a compliance inspection under HOA Directive 7.09. I laughed again, not out of humor this time. More like you do when someone pulls a squirt gun on you at a poker table. "You're not setting foot on this property," I said, wiping grout off my hands and walking toward them. "This isn't your jurisdiction." Your trespassing mustache raised an eyebrow. "Sir, failure to comply may result in administrative penalties and asset seizure. You've got about 5 seconds to get back in that SUV before I call the sheriff." He smirked. They didn't move. So I pulled my phone out and did just that. While I waited, I stood on the porch like a gargoyle, watching them mill around by the mailbox, pretending to take notes and photos. One woman in a ponytail walked around to the side yard and started peering into windows. That's when I snapped. I walked down the steps right into Mustache's personal space. Get off my land. Now. The sheriff is on his way. You're making this unnecessarily difficult, he muttered. You ain't seen difficult, I said, and stood there, arms crossed, heart rate spiking, but face calm. I'd dealt with armed felons and crooked DAs. A few clipboard-wielding Karens didn't scare me. 10 minutes later, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Sheriff's cruiser. For a split second, I thought, finally. Sanity. But when the door opened, my stomach sank. Deputy Randall Randy Thomason, nephew of a former magistrate, the former magistrate, Meredith Cholmes. I recognized his dumb little smirk before I recognized his badge. The second cop getting out of the passenger side, that was David Keene. Used to clerk for the county court back when Meredith was still on the bench. Of all the officers in the county, these two had to show up. They greeted the compliance crew like old friends. Fist bumps. A few chuckles. Then Randy turned to me and said, "We've had a report of jurisdictional conflict here, Mr. Lawson." I folded my arms tighter. "No conflict. These people are trespassing." He didn't even look at me. "Sir, we have paperwork suggesting this property may be under HOA jurisdiction pending administrative clarification." "What paperwork?" "From whom?" He held up a folder. "From Sierra Heights Board of Trustees, including zoning amendments filed last year." My voice went cold. That application was denied. I've seen the public record. Keene finally looked me in the eye. Until it's resolved, we're initiating a temporary hold. We'll need you to vacate the premises. I almost laughed again, but it came out hollow. "You're kidding." "No, sir," said Randy, stepping forward. "Let's make this easy. Pack a few essentials. You'll get everything back once it's cleared. Do you have a warrant?" "This is an administrative order." "Not criminal," he replied. "It's a gray area." Best to comply. I didn't move. He moved first. They escorted me off my own porch. Literally. Hand on the elbow, slow and quiet. I didn't resist. That was rule number 1. Don't give them what they want. Don't get arrested. Don't shout. Document. Fight later. The right way. They sealed the door with yellow tape. Not police tape. HOA branded tape with their damn logo stamped in intervals like they were a government agency. I stood there on the edge of my land. Heart pounding, blood boiling, watching strangers stand guard over a house I had legally purchased and rightfully owned. The desert wind kicked up dust across the driveway, and I realized something that chilled me deeper than anything else. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. They didn't arrest me. That would have made it too clean, too obvious. No, they just escorted me off my own land like a drunk uncle overstaying Thanksgiving. No charges, no paperwork, just 2 smirking deputies and a bunch of clipboard cowboys playing government with HOA logos on their polos. And they left me standing there in the dirt, my truck locked behind my own gate, my tools still in the garage, and my house taped shut with what looked like designer caution tape. I drove straight to the next town over, to a guy named Russ Calder. Retired sheriff. Good man. Known him since we were both still pretending we believed in the system. He poured me a coffee that tasted like gasoline and listened while I told him everything. His face didn't move much, but I could tell when I got to the part about the administrative order that something shifted behind his eyes. "That's not a real thing," he said. "Not at the county level. Not unless a judge signs off. And even then, it wouldn't come from an HOA exactly. You've got a title. In the glove box. And no liens?" "Not a one." Russ nodded. "Then someone's trying to steamroll you, brother." He made a couple of calls, mostly to old court contacts. By the time I left his place, I already had confirmation. No lawful order of seizure had been filed or authorized. Whatever those deputies were acting on, it wasn't from the court. It was from the HOA, which meant they were operating on a lie, or worse, were part of it. I drove back toward my land and stopped on a ridge with a decent sightline. Pulled out a pair of binoculars, and watched. 2 guys in plain clothes were walking the perimeter. One had a camera, one had bolt cutters. They were inside my fence. I called the sheriff's department. The woman on dispatch put me on hold for 12 minutes, then came back and said, "We'll make a note of it." No unit dispatched. The next morning, I found out my surveillance system had been gutted, literally ripped out of the wall. I had 6 cameras, motion triggered, night vision, remote feed. I'd installed them myself with proper permits. Now there were just wires hanging out like pulled veins. Every SD card gone. I reported it. Got an automated response thanking me for contacting county IT incident reporting. Not even law enforcement. It felt deliberate. By that afternoon, my name was already spreading, just not how I expected. Someone started a thread on the local neighborhood app titled "New Owner Squats on Sierra Heights Expansion Zone. Possible Fraud." My name, address, even a Google Street View screenshot of my home were included. There were over 80 comments. He's probably one of those land scam guys. Bet it's a meth lab. He looks military. That kind always thinks the rules don't apply. I wanted to respond, to correct the record, but I knew better. That was bait. Instead, I made calls. Real ones. First to the county clerk. I requested every document ever filed by Sierra Heights related to land acquisition, zoning adjustments, or expansion proposals. I also asked for the rejection letters. They existed. I knew they did. Then I called an old contact in the district attorney's office, not for representation, just for a sanity check. "Let me get this straight," he said, after hearing the basics. "They taped your house shut?" HOA tape. "No warrant, just badges and bullshit." He paused. "You're sitting on land they tried to annex last year. Their petition was thrown out in October, something about water rights and improper notice." Meredith Cholmes was pushing hard for it. That name again. Meredith Cholmes, former magistrate, now president of Sierra Heights, HOA, a woman with more connections than ethics. She was the common thread. A few more calls confirmed what I suspected. The map they were using, the one Randy waved around like it was gospel, was from a rejected zoning application, not a certified plat. That meant they had no legal standing to claim my land. Zero. Zip. Nada. But they were acting like they did. So I changed tactics. I booked a room in town and started building a war chest. Scans of my deed, title history, tax records, plat surveys, easement documents. I pulled everything I had. Even found the recorded transaction with Hank McRae's kids. Private deal, but registered clean with the assessor's office. No ambiguity, no overlapping jurisdiction. Then came the cherry on top. I found the original denied expansion request from Sierra Heights, buried in the county meeting archives. It had been voted down 5-2, citing community objections, lack of infrastructure plans, and illegitimate encroachment on surrounding parcels. Guess which parcel was top of that list? Mine. So now, I had motive. Sierra Heights had tried to steal this land before, legally, and failed. Now with the old man gone and the land off the public radar, they figured they could slide it into their domain with fake authority and intimidation. They picked the wrong guy. The final insult came 3 days after I was locked out of my house. I went to the county clerk's office to retrieve certified copies of my property file. The clerk, sweet woman named Belinda, looked up at me, confused. "Garrett, your property status was flagged. It says pending ownership review. What the hell does that mean?" "It's odd. It's like a placeholder flag. There's no court order attached, but someone from a third party marked it for review last week." "Which third party?" She hesitated, then turned her screen toward me. Sierra Heights Legal Committee. They'd submitted a document claiming a possible gap in the title chain, citing intent to establish HOA management rights over the parcel. There was no legal authority behind it, but it was enough to freeze certain transactions, like unlocking access, or reestablishing surveillance accounts, or filing for damage repair. They were trying to strangle me procedurally. I walked out of that office feeling like someone had just jammed a screwdriver into my spine. This wasn't just a land grab anymore, it was a siege. They wanted a fight in the dark, quiet, muddy back-channel warfare. That's how HOA types work. Not through guns or guts, but through paper, protocol, and the assumption that most folks will give up before it costs them sleep. They should have picked someone else. I didn't just know the law, I taught it. I spent 20 years as a bloodhound for the district attorney's office, specializing in land fraud and regulatory abuse. I've buried city planners and real estate developers for less than what Sierra Heights had already done. The difference was, this time, they came for me. I started the morning with a spreadsheet, color-coded and aggressive, green for confirmed ownership documents, red for points of obstruction, yellow for anything touched by Sierra Heights. Within a day, I had 76 lines of data, and every one of them told the same story. I owned this land clean, and they were building a lie around it. I filed a formal request with the County Land Records Department to lift the procedural hold placed by Sierra Heights. I attached notarized proof of ownership, easement rights, and tax records dating back 10 years. The flag had no legal weight, but until it was lifted, utilities, permits, and banking actions were locked up like a Vegas vault. I had to move fast. That same afternoon, I drove to the Public Archives Center and requested the full hearing transcript for Sierra Heights' last expansion bid, the one rejected in 2023. After 2 hours of back and forth with a temp clerk who couldn't find her own desk, I got it. Reading the transcript was like watching someone try to lie their way through a wedding toast. Meredith Cholmes, Madame President of the HOA, had tried to argue that the veteran who owned my land had expressed intent to convert the parcel into communal development. Except, Hank McCrae had died 2 months before that meeting. I checked the date twice. Dead men don't annex property. That little nugget went straight into the evidence folder. I wasn't working alone anymore either. I got a call back from Tasha Green, a journalist I knew back in El Paso, the kind who lives for local corruption stories. She'd covered a scandal 10 years ago where a real estate trust forged elderly homeowners' signatures to flip houses under their noses. I helped her then. She owed me. "Garrett," she said, "this smells like probate fraud and zoning abuse had an incest baby." "Good. You want it?" "God, yes." We agreed on a quiet collaboration. I'd feed her documents. She'd keep digging in HOA campaign donations, legal filings, and internal comms. She already had a source, someone from inside Sierra Heights, fed up with Meredith's empire building. That night, I slept in my truck. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to be close to the land. I parked just off the county road on legal ground, where I could see my house in the distance, half lit by the moon, half choked by lies. At 4 a.m, I saw headlights. A pickup truck, black, no plates. It pulled into my drive, parked, then backed out. 5 minutes later, an SUV followed the same route, slower, like it was taking pictures. I recorded both on a handheld dash cam and sent the footage straight to Tasha. The next morning, I walked into the county courthouse with a folder, the thickness of a Bible, and the mood of a man preparing for holy war. I filed a civil suit under my own name, Lawson versus Sierra Heights HOA, Meredith Cholmes, Deputy Randall Thomason, and Deputy David Keene. The charges? Civil trespass, fraudulent misrepresentation of jurisdiction, interference with property rights, abuse of process, collusion with law enforcement, extortion under the guise of administrative assessment. I also submitted a separate complaint to the State Attorney General's office, referencing patterned abuse by a private governing entity backed by falsified zoning materials. I wasn't playing checkers anymore. This was chess. Full board, middle game, pawns falling. The courthouse clerk raised her eyebrows as she logged the complaint. "You think this'll get traction?" she asked. "Oh," I said, "I know it will." The following week was a blur. Tasha published the first article, HOA hijacks desert parcel in secret grab. Ex-prosecutor fights back. It went semi-viral in the state's legal circles. The comments section was a glorious mess of HOA horror stories, legal tips, and at least 3 libertarians declaring me a hero of the freeland movement. I wasn't interested in becoming a symbol. I just wanted my damn house back. That Friday, I finally got a call back from someone I hadn't expected. Eli Stenger, senior zoning investigator for the county. He was terse and borderline panicked. "Mr. Lawson, we have a problem. I'm listening. We received a revised zoning map from Sierra Heights last month. It included your parcel as part of their community jurisdiction. They claimed it was a clerical correction, so we temporarily accepted it pending review. And you didn't check it? It looked clean. It had court-like stamps, even a reference code. But now, we can't trace the source of that stamp. It's not from our system." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "You're telling me they faked the zoning overlay?" "I think so. But it's subtle, done by someone who knows how to manipulate legacy GIS. Jesus." "Yeah." I thanked him, hung up, and added document forgery to my legal complaint. By now, I had enough evidence to launch a crusade, but something still felt off. Too polished. Too orchestrated. This wasn't just HOA overreach. It was a long con. They'd been preparing for this. The fake jurisdiction, the procedural flag, the police cooperation, it all pointed to something larger. Someone had planned to take this land long before I ever showed up. And now I was starting to see the edges of the plan. There's a kind of silence you get in the desert right before a sandstorm. No birds, no bugs, just the air itself holding its breath. That's how it felt the morning I cracked open the envelope. It had no return address, just my name and a scrawled "Confidential" across the front. Inside, 5 color-printed pages. The first was a map. Not just any map, but the map Sierra Heights had submitted to the zoning board. The same one that had been used to justify locking me out of my home. Only this version came with annotations, red circles, highlighted boundaries, handwritten notes like "Merge here, cover Lot 9A," and next to my parcel, "Flag for jurisdiction in advance, CH to follow up, CH Chomes." The next 4 pages were internal HOA emails. Someone had printed them out. They were real. I knew enough about metadata formatting and legal headers to spot a legit dump when I saw one. The first was from Meredith herself, sent to what looked like a private HOA planning thread. "If we can't secure Lot 9A through merger, we'll assert authority via compliance inspection and temporary hold. Use map revision from Daniels. No need for full board vote." Flag as procedural, the second one chilled me more. "Ensure Randy gets the sealed copy with stamp overlay. Keen will manage the service side. Camera feed must be neutralized before visit. If Lawson resists, document as trespass. If Lawson resists." I wasn't a trespasser. I was the target of a staged takeover. I took photos of the documents, scanned them, and locked the originals in a safe deposit box. Then I called Eli Stenger, the zoning investigator. He met me that afternoon in a diner 30 miles outside town. Neutral ground. I slid the pages across the table without a word, watched his eyes as he read. His jaw tightened. 1 page in, he muttered, "This is felonious." He flipped to the map. This wasn't just a forged document. This was a coordinated plan to trick the system into accepting a new overlay. He looked up at me. "They're not just trying to expand. They're trying to rewrite jurisdiction in real time without legal process. And using my property as the wedge." He nodded. "Someone's going to prison for this." I raised my coffee mug. That's the plan. When I got back into town, my phone buzzed with a message from Tasha. "You'll want to see this." She sent a link. It was a private leak site, whistleblower platform she used when normal channels got slow. The headline read, "Inside Sierra Heights, Power Fraud and the Land They Want to Erase." It had screenshots, the same emails I'd received, names, meeting logs, even a quote from an anonymous HOA board member stating that Meredith said the guy's a loner, easy to steamroll. If he pushes back, we'll drown him in forms. The post was picking up traction fast, hundreds of shares. Comments from lawyers, property owners, former HOA victims. Meredith responded that evening with a press release calling it fake news generated by a disgruntled squatter. Squatter. I'd bought that property in cash. Had the title in my truck. Registered, taxed, and surveyed. She'd gone from bureaucrat to full-blown propagandist, but the worst was yet to come. 2 days later, I flew in a forensic tech, former federal IT contractor, to do a data recovery sweep on my demolished surveillance system. I'd pulled the remains of the SD cards from the ground around my property. Most were scratched, some snapped in half, but this guy, Mason, was a wizard with corrupted storage. He called me late that night with a voice like he'd just found a dead body. "Garrett, you might want to sit down. I'm already lying in a hotel bed eating jerky. Hit me, I got partial video from 3 angles. Timestamp matches the day you were removed." "Okay, you're going to want to watch it." He sent the file. It showed exactly what I remembered, and more. 2 deputies, Meredith A. Mann in HOA vest. They walked around the house, cut my locks, and entered without a warrant. They didn't knock, didn't pause. Just walked in like it was already theirs. Then came the moment I hadn't seen, the one that made my blood go cold. Randy, the deputy, walked over to the main camera hub, reached behind it, and pulled the power cord. Meredith handed him a small black bag. Looked like a hard drive. He plugged it in. "Overwrite, full wipe," she said. Clear as day. Caught on my own audio. They hadn't just destroyed my surveillance system, they'd replaced it with fake footage. I sent the file to my lawyer, to Tasha, and to 3 state-level officials I still had on speed dial. One of them was with the Department of Public Integrity. The next morning, a subpoena went out to the county sheriff's department. Randy and Keen were officially under investigation. Meanwhile, HOA volunteers, or possibly hired contractors, were remodeling my home. I had drone footage now, roofing repairs, a new gate, painted shutters, landscaping. They were trying to make it look like a Sierra Heights property, to whitewash the takeover, to erase me. I wasn't just dealing with liars. I was dealing with land pirates and golf carts, and a system that had started letting them play sheriff. The first hearing was set for 9 a.m. on a Thursday, and I arrived early enough to watch the janitor unlock the courthouse doors. I wanted to see every inch of this process, from the flickering hallway fluorescence to the scuffed marble under my boots. This wasn't just about me anymore. I was dragging Meredith Cholmes, her plastic kingdom, and her hired goons into the daylight. And they were going to squint. Inside courtroom B, it smelled like stale coffee and institutional fear. The kind of place where 1,000 traffic tickets and 3 broken marriages had been arbitrated, all under the same flickering ceiling fan. The HOA showed up with a team. 4 suits, all smug and polished, like they thought I was going to show up in denim and bring a tractor as legal counsel. Meredith was there too, dressed like she was auditioning for a Supreme Court fashion show, gray skirt suit, pearls, and a grim little smile that said, "I still think I'm winning." I sat alone at my table. Just me, my laptop, a thick binder of exhibits, and the truth. The judge, Honorable Mary Ann Keller, called the room to order. She was sharp-eyed, mid-50s, and known for zero tolerance toward procedural games. I'd once seen her shut down a developer mid-sentence for trying to reclassify a commercial rezoning as agrarian workspace. I liked her already. We started with my motion for emergency injunctive relief, a legal way of saying, "Get these people off my land, now." Their lawyer, some silver-haired corporate type named Crossley, stood up and tried to paint me as a volatile individual with unclear ownership claims. I let him talk. Then I stood up, walked to the evidence table, and dropped 4 certified documents one by one. My deed, signed and sealed. The property tax record showing payments in my name. The county zoning rejection of Sierra Heights merger petition from last year. A notarized affidavit from the zoning investigator confirming falsified overlays submitted by HOA. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. When I got to the video, there was an audible shift in the room. The judge watched in silence as Randy and Keene entered my home. No warrant, no notice, and Meredith handed over the hard drive. When overwrite full wipe echoed through the speakers, her composure cracked for just a second. "Mr. Crossley," the judge said, folding her hands, "would you care to explain this to the court?" Crossley cleared his throat. "Your Honor, these events occurred under what our client believed was a jurisdictional gray zone. The HOA acted in good faith. The footage shows your client instructing law enforcement to destroy private surveillance records." She snapped. He hesitated. "We are open to a mutually agreeable resolution," he said. I looked him dead in the eyes. No. That was the moment the tide turned. The judge granted the emergency injunction, ordering immediate restoration of access to my property, full cessation of HOA activities on or adjacent to my parcel, and preservation of all records under court protection. Meredith's jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might shatter, but that wasn't enough, because back at home, even with my property restored, the damage was done. The new locks HOA had installed were still warm. My furniture had been moved. One of the bedroom walls had been painted eggshell, as if that somehow made this whole thing civilized. They were erasing me in real time. And when I stood in the middle of my living room and saw a folded flyer on the coffee table, "Sierra Heights welcomes you, HOA orientation packet," I knew this wasn't over. The next day, Meredith sent a messenger, not a letter, an actual guy in a cheap suit, probably a junior associate, nervous and sweating through his collar. He handed me a thick envelope. "President Cholmes is offering to settle privately," he said, "in the interest of community stability." I didn't even open it. I handed it back. "You tell her I don't settle with people who break into my house." He hesitated. "The package includes infrastructure support, waived assessments for 3 years, and HOA-sponsored legal clarity on land status. Tell her I'm going to court. And then I'm going to her HOA." He left. That night, something changed. People from inside Sierra Heights started emailing me, quietly, discreetly, some anonymous, some signed. They thanked me, said things like, "We didn't know how bad it was. She's been running the board like a dictatorship. You're the first person who stood up to her, and one that stood out. I have documents from the 2022 board meeting where this all started. You'll want to see them. The cracks were forming. Meredith wasn't just losing a case. She was losing control. The next envelope didn't come by mail. It was hand-delivered in a manila folder, slipped under the door of my motel room sometime between midnight and 5 a.m. No name, no note, just 27 pages of HOA meeting minutes, signed, time-stamped, and, most damning of all, not intended for public record. I read them in silence, my back against the motel headboard, coffee going cold on the nightstand. They'd been planning this for years. The earliest notes dated back to 2022, a special session of the Sierra Heights HOA board. Only 6 members present, no general membership invited. Meredith chaired the meeting. The topic? Strategic Land Absorption Plan. Lot 9. A. My land was listed as Target Parcel Alpha. The language was dry, bureaucratic, and absolutely damning. Current owner elderly. Anticipate probate pathway. Recommend keeping parcel off. Acquisition market until HOA obtains annexation authorization. In case of private buyer, initiate compliance maneuvering and soft jurisdiction pressure. They even discussed potential tactics. Flooding the buyer with violations. Dash access obstruction via private road maintenance claims. Using friendly officers to ensure compliance optics. I leaned forward and stared at the last page. Target must not be permitted to establish full presence before jurisdiction is asserted. Delay title actions via administrative flags if necessary. Target they hadn't seen me as a neighbor or even as a person, just an obstacle. I emailed the full document set to Tasha with a single word, confirmed. She replied 5 minutes later, this just went federal. By noon, the state attorney general's office had opened an investigation. A case number was assigned. Meredith Cholmes was officially under inquiry for zoning fraud, conspiracy to commit real estate manipulation, and abuse of HOA authority under color of law. The same afternoon, 2 federal agents showed up at the Sierra Heights HOA headquarters, a converted community clubhouse with faux columns and one too many security cameras. They walked out 2 hours later with boxes, laptops, records, files. And Meredith? She was nowhere to be seen. That night, I got a call from someone I didn't expect. Randy, the deputy who'd helped throw me off my own land. He didn't sound like himself. Lawson, he muttered, I didn't know the whole thing. You cut my locks and helped stage a fake seizure. I thought the order was real. Meredith showed us a stamped document. Looked official. It was forged. Yeah, I know that now. He paused. I'm cooperating with the feds. Just thought you should know, you turning state's witness. Not officially. Yet, then I don't care. I hung up. Maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe not. Didn't matter. I wasn't playing their redemption arc. But there was one thing I did care about. The paper trail. I started digging into HOA's financials through their mandatory public disclosures, IRS filings, and a few documents a brave board member had leaked anonymously. What I found nearly knocked the wind out of me. Over the past 3 years, Sierra Heights had diverted over $700,000 from general funds into what they labeled a land acquisition reserve. Most HOAs don't even have that category, but they did. And it was funded by special assessments, charges levied on residents for things like road maintenance and security upgrades. Those upgrades, pure fiction. The funds had been redirected toward lobbying zoning officials, hiring private surveyors, and in at least one instance, paying off a retired county clerk to delay title processing on an unwanted parcel. That wasn't incompetence. That was a criminal enterprise with a garden club logo. Tasha ran with it. Her next expose hit local TV. When neighborhood power goes rogue, how one HOA tried to steal private property and got caught. The footage from my cameras was aired in full. The emails, the documents, even the leaked meeting notes. By the next morning, Meredith's face was all over the news, and not in the way she liked. She issued a brief statement denying all wrongdoing and blaming a rogue former board member for falsifying documents. The same day, 2 more Sierra Heights board members resigned. That night, I walked the perimeter of my land. The new gate had been torn down by order of the judge. My locks were back on. The cameras were restored. The silence was clean again. No footsteps that didn't belong. No trucks watching from the road. But peace was still a long way off, because the court case hadn't even reached trial yet. And Meredith Cholmes, cornered and humiliated, had one last card to play. The courtroom was packed. not in the polite civic duty way, more like a wildfire trial or a small-town scandal that finally burst into the open. Local news vans lined the curb. Someone in the back row was live streaming on a burner Instagram account called HOAHELL. People brought popcorn, actual popcorn. The bailiff wasn't amused. Neither was the judge, now a federal magistrate, since the case had escalated after the state attorney general formally referred it for broader prosecution under interstate fraud statutes, because it turned out I wasn't the only one they'd tried this with, just the only one who'd fought back hard enough to light the match. But today wasn't about the big picture. It was about Meredith Cholmes and whether the evidence against her and her HOA machine would stick in open court. I sat at the plaintiff's table with my lawyer, a quiet bulldog of a woman named Abigail Royce. She wore boots under her pantsuit and had the sort of stare that made county clerks stutter. Across the aisle sat Meredith, looking about 15 pounds thinner and 30 shades paler than when she first smirked into my driveway. Her legal team had shrunk too, down to one harried defense attorney and an assistant who looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. First came the exhibits. We started with the video. I'd seen it a dozen times, but this time it hit different. Up on that courtroom screen, with a jury watching, the judge scribbling notes, and Meredith pretending to study a speck of lint on her lapel. Footage of her walking into my house. No warrant, no hesitation, just arrogance. Then the audio. Overwrite. Full wipe silence, then murmurs. The judge banged her gavel once and said calmly, "Let's proceed." Next came the forensic analysis. Mason, my data recovery guy, testified with screenshots, recovery timestamps, even metadata from the overwritten drive. He showed how the footage had been manually erased and replaced with static filler footage, dated the exact same hour I was evicted. Then came Eli Stenger, the zoning investigator. He was calm, methodical, deadly. Walked the court through the fake zoning map, pointed out GIS anomalies, explained how the stamp used by Sierra Heights was lifted from a 20-year-old floodplain overlay, digitally resized, and pasted over a modern document. A cut-and-paste fraud, and it wasn't sloppy. It was deliberate. Then we played the cherry on top, the leaked HOA meeting audio from the board member who finally cracked, the same one who'd left a manila envelope under my door. Meredith's voice again. Clear, commanding, sharp as a dagger. Once the land is under freeze, we'll begin phase 2. If the owner contests it, flood him with infractions, tie him up in appeals. We have sympathetic deputies. If he makes noise, escalate and isolate. The room felt colder after that. Abigail leaned over to me and whispered, "We just buried her." The defense fumbled. They tried to blame rogue board members, rogue clerks, rogue zoning staff. At one point, Meredith's lawyer tried to argue that she was misled by internal advisors. The judge looked at him like he tried to defend arson by saying the match was confused. But the most telling moment, when Meredith herself took the stand. She was composed at first, called me aggressive, said she felt threatened, and insisted the HOA had acted out of a desire to ensure orderly development. But under cross, she crumbled. Abigail ripped through her facade like tissue paper, pulling up conflicting statements from old emails, comparing time-stamped security footage with her sworn claims, exposing lies so bold even the jury looked uncomfortable. Then the bomb. Abigail handed her a printout of an email sent to a private server, the one we found during discovery, routed through a fake HOA subdomain. If this doesn't work, we bury him in noise. We turn the property into a compliance sinkhole. Make him want to leave. Her hand shook when she read it. She didn't speak. The judge adjourned for a 2-hour recess. When we came back, it was time for closing arguments. I didn't speak. Abigail did. And she didn't beg or embellish. She told the truth about property rights, about abuse of authority, about what happens when neighborhood power turns predatory. The jury was out for less than 3 hours. They came back unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Fraud. Document falsification, conspiracy to unlawfully seize private property, tampering with surveillance, abuse of public trust, criminal misrepresentation of zoning jurisdiction. The courtroom didn't erupt. It went quiet. Like the entire county had been holding its breath for this moment. Meredith was taken into custody immediately. Her eyes darted around like she still couldn't believe it, like she was the victim of some petty misunderstanding. Not a woman who'd just been legally defined as a white-collar tyrant. The deputies who'd helped her, already under separate indictment. Internal Affairs had opened their own investigations, and federal prosecutors were pressing charges. As for the HOA, Sierra Heights was ordered dissolved. Every board member resigned under court pressure. All funds frozen, all assessments suspended. Every property owner who'd been affected, even tangentially, became eligible for civil restitution. And me, I walked out of that courthouse a free man. Not because I'd won, but because I never should have had to fight in the first place. I spent the first morning of my new life on the porch. Not some motel balcony or courthouse bench, but my own damn porch, wrapped around a slab of adobe that no longer carried chains of someone else's fantasy. The wind had shifted. The desert, that wide, open breath of earth, finally sounded like peace again. No engines idling in the distance, no footsteps behind the fence, just wind, dust, and birds, the kind of silence you earn. The compensation came in quickly, almost too quickly. The court awarded me $1.2 million, not just for damages and property interference, but for emotional distress, unlawful seizure, and reputational harm. HOA assets were liquidated. The board's personal liability insurance policies cracked under the weight of the class action wave now forming behind me. Other residents of Sierra Heights, the ones who'd stayed silent or just confused, started reaching out. Not all with apologies, some with questions. One guy asked if I could help him find out if his own HOA fees had been illegally inflated. Another said his garage had been renovated without his permission back in 2021 and billed to him retroactively. The sickness hadn't started with my land. It just ended here. The local news stations kept running the story for weeks. Retired prosecutor brings down rogue HOA. Zoning scandal exposes HOA power abuse. One of them ran a segment with side-by-side drone footage. My property under illegal HOA occupation versus now. Fully restored, cameras reinstalled, solar panels gleaming like quiet revenge. But I didn't want a parade, didn't want to be a symbol, so I did what I've always done when things get loud. I taught. I started a webinar series free and open to the public. Know Your Dirt, Fighting HOA Overreach and Land Theft in the U.S. In the first session, we had 70 people. By the third, over 3,000. Property owners from all over the country, from Florida swampland retirees to California canyon ranchers, tuned in with questions, stories, documents. HOA horror wasn't just local, it was everywhere. Buried in bylaws, dressed up in faux legalese, justified by terms like community compliance and preserving neighborhood standards. They were hungry to fight back, and I was more than happy to hand them a sharpened blade. One day, about a month after the final ruling, I got a letter. Typed, no return address, no signature. You were supposed to fold. You were supposed to be easy. You weren't. You made noise, and now we're all buried beneath it. I burned it without reading it twice. Then I went to the hardware store and had a custom sign made. Big, industrial, bolted into a steel post sunk 3 feet into the ground just beyond the entrance gate. Black text, white reflective letters. It read, "This land does not belong to your HOA. Trespassers will face federal charges. No flourish, no threats. Just a reminder. You don't get to steal what isn't yours. Not my land, not my rights, not anymore."